Sunday morning to you. It's the 25th of August, 2024, and this week we're continuing our series on casting compounds, polymer casting compounds. We are going to test Magic Pour this week. We tested Resin last week. So we're going to do pretty much the same test, but we're going to swap out some of the colorants for colorants that we haven't used yet. Let's roll some clips. The first thing I did was open that big tub, and the product itself is in a plastic bag. In the tub, we're going to use tempera paint blue as well. We're going to use turmeric again, and we're going to use spirulina powder, which we did not use last week. We used green alcohol ink last week. Still thinking like a baker here, I put my dry ingredients into my dry ingredients, and then I pour the water in. That door hanger is a very shallow mold, and I don't think that it's going to be all that steady or stable because it's so thin. Now with spirulina powder, you have to kind of watch and break up lumps if you find them. I pour my water in. Hi, last minute edit me. We're going to delete the whole spirulina as a dark green powdered colorant for this episode because I ran this experiment twice. I was extremely careful with my measurements, factoring in weights and volumes and whatnot and so forth. And there is something wrong with the combination of spirulina powder and Magic Pour. So we're just cutting it out and moving on. Turmeric. This next pour is sped up a whole lot because you've already seen me mix it up. I have 2 teaspoons of turmeric in the Magic Pour, and I've poured my water in. I'm mixing it up. I can tell you that over an hour later, even though these pours were done back to back, over an hour later, those green pours are not set, and that may be due to water. And so after we do these 2 square coasters and put the overflow in our little overflow mold, and if you remember, I said that Pretty Not Perfect Crafts did a test, and 2 of the products she tested out of 5 or 6 were Magic Pour and Resin. Magic Pour, I could see from her test, took dyeing or colorants very well, and so I expect the coaster and the little overpour molds to be a much more orangey finished product than the one that we had last week. All right, here we go with our blue tempera paint, and I've already put all the dry ingredients together, and I'm going to mix it up here. And this third time, I was really careful about the ratio, paying attention to what I was doing. And here's what I can tell you. Expect pancake batter. The Resin is easier to mix, and it feels super watery. It feels like skim milk at first when you're done mixing it. The Magic Pour, expect it to be like pancake batter. It does take a little more mixing. And I have been pondering whether sifting this ingredient before I pour it into an exact measure for pouring is a good idea. It's very fluffy powder compared to Resin, and I'm wondering if I sift my dry colors, into the Magic Pour first, if that will make a difference. Now, this was still a good workout, this blue, but it was much easier in the end, even though I had to be thorough about it. And what I did different this time is not only did I mix my dry tempera paint in there, but I adjusted the water for the total weight of Magic Pour plus the tempera paint. And honestly, I think it made it easier to work with in the end. Now you're seeing me doing a lot of tapping and a lot of poking, and that's because the bubbles are coming up out of this like a hot pancake before you flip it. So I think I'm going to stick with that method when I'm using dry pigments. I'm going to factor in their weight into the Magic Pour, and then when I'm using wet pigments, I'm going to put them into the water and factor that in. Let's move on to liquid colorants. And the first one we're going to try is that liquefied or rehydrated blue tempera paint. And I use 5 milliliters or 1 dropper full. I put it into my water, and this is a 70 grams powder to 21 grams water ratio plus 5 milliliters of liquid tempera paint. And I give it a little stir, and then I pour it in. And, you know, this formulation for resin or polymer compound casting just mystifies me, because this stuff seized up and I had to really dig and scrape the bottom, as you will see, to get everything mixed up, which I did, and it poured, and I jiggled the bubbles out, and it cured in the time frame that the manufacturer says, a half hour. One thing I will note about this is the color in the cup is more purple, much more purple than our test piece with Resincrete. The next one we're going to try is that inexpensive alcohol ink, and I have chosen the darkest purple I have. 7 drops into my water, and this time I dig a hole so that the liquid goes farther down, and I get on the struggle bus and dig around on the very bottom to get that powder incorporated. And it's, another 7 drops because we barely have any color at all. So we're up to 14 drops, and I'm digging and digging and digging to get the powder up into where the water is. And I finally am frustrated, and I say to myself, I have a 5 gram tolerance, so I'm going to put 5 grams in, and then it becomes like Resincrete, like skim milk. And I know that that is not going to set anytime today. So I put in, I think, 2 or 3 grams at the most extra powder and start again. And it thickens up, not quite to pancake batter, and I still don't have decent color out of my darkest purple. 7 more drops go in for a total of 21 drops of alcohol ink. I get out one of my larger coaster molds. I give it a stir. I make sure that I have, enough color mixing, and do my pour and my over pour. And sure enough, the tempera paint is dry. Last liquid for today is the same acrylic paint we used with Resincrete. And I measured out exactly a 1/4 teaspoon, which is what I put in the Resincrete. But this time I used a measuring spoon so you could see that I used a 1/4 teaspoon of acrylic paint. And I stir it up and stir it up and stir it up. I dig a hole and I pour my liquid water and tempera paint in, and it seizes up again. And I'm digging around on the bottom. You can see, I just showed you where it's all stuck to the bottom and not hydrated. So once again, I am frustrated, and I put in about 2 grams of water to loosen it up, and work at it and work at it and work at it, and I can see that the color is going to be hot pink, and I don't want hot pink, so I put in another 1/4 teaspoon. I didn't measure it this time, but I can tell by eyeballing it, it's roughly a 1/4 teaspoon. Mixed it up and got one of my larger molds, and it is the consistency of cold yogurt. It's thick. It's not lumpy, but it's very thick, and it holds its shape. But I know once I scrape that cup out, which was no small feat, I will be able to tap the table and it will self-level, and I push it around into the geo shape, and you can see me giving it light taps and popping bubbles. and sure enough, it levels out. But it is a royal pain in the cup, and I don't know why, and I need to know why. So here are the three we just poured in various stages of drying. The rehydrated tempera paint on the left is dry, but not cured. These take a day or two to cure. In the middle is our alcohol ink, a very pale lavender, and it is setting. And then on the right or the left, the acrylic paint we just poured. What did we learn from comparing these two? Well, the first thing we learned is that door hanger is too shallow for any of these products. It can only be used with resin, and that's fine. I didn't care. We can also see that it's very fragile if it's thin. It needs to be coaster size. And the coaster color was nice, but the color separated, and when I did some rough trimming, it left a white line where the most color had saturated the product. The yellow coaster, on the other hand, actually cracked. And I think that blemish on the top is where it cracked, but it healed itself and it's pretty solid. The blue coaster also was very solid, as is the blue coaster done with Magic Pour. And there is some color problems with using wet tempera paint as opposed to the dry tempera paint. The dry tempera paint actually incorporated much better. Next up in our liquid colorants is alcohol ink. 21 drops in this coaster, and it unmolded fine. It's thick enough. There are no cracks or bubbles. The detail came out beautifully, but the color just isn't there. And I just showed you that the acrylic is still drying and will probably take a couple of hours to dry, unlike the little sample we did with Resincrete. And here are our overpours for the liquid tempera paint where we hydrated it. I thought this was just a cabochon. It's a little picture frame. It does have bubbles on the edges, but I could probably fix that and it would be a very cute piece. As well as this. I thought this was a cabochon. It's not. It's an oval picture frame. Again, very cute. And the color is much more even in smaller pieces. Now, Magic Pour only comes in a giant tub. It's enough to make quite a few projects, like trays, small boxes, as well as a ton of jewelry pieces. Whereas Resincrete comes in a much smaller container. It's a bag, not a tub, as you saw last week and this week. And frankly, it doesn't take color as well as Magic Pour does. Now, both manufacturers will likely say, we have a colorant product that you can use and your results might be a lot better than what you tested. And that's fine, except my answer to that is polymer compounds have been out on the market for a couple of years, and they should have, in my opinion, given better instructions, both of them, and they should have put in their instructions what will work and what will not work. Do I expect them to run a test on turmeric? No. Do I expect them to run a test on spirulina powder? A beautiful green. No, I don't. But I do expect them to run a test on something like tempera paint and acrylic paint and watercolors and mica, which you lose your sparkle in mica. I made my choice based on color and what I perceived to be value for what I was spending in using Magic Pour by Let's Resin, and I'm disappointed, as you can tell. None of these experiments in the last couple of weeks have been sponsored by anybody. I have, over time, bought all the products, bought molds, all that jazz. And so, from a real life perspective, this is as objective a test as I can get it. Nobody is paying for any of this. Nevertheless, I've done the cost breakdown for you, and if I'm just doing this as a hobby to make gifts for friends, I already know that with Magic Pour, I'm going to be spending $1.20 per coaster for just the powder. And with Resincrete, it's $2 per coaster for just the product. Please don't let my frustration dissuade you. If you're interested in this product, by all means, jump in with both feet. Pick one of them based on what you saw me do or Pretty Not Perfect does, and jump in. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thanks so much for joining me. God bless you, and I'll see you real soon.